Welcome to 365 Brothers, the podcast. Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Robin Shine, and get ready for another episode where I introduce you to another amazing, interesting, intriguing, and inspiring African-American man from the United States. They come from a variety of professions, various parts of this nation, and all of them bring their wisdom. So, chill out, relax, and listen in. Make sure you follow us. We're on Instagram at 365 Brothers. Also, you can go to 365brothers.com/Linktree, LINKTREE, 365 Brothers /Linktree. You'll find links to all things 365 Brothers, as well as links to anything Robin Shine. Again, thank you, and let's listen in. Our guest today is Dr. James Smith. He is an alumni of North Carolina Central University, where he earned both a Bachelor of Science and his law degree. He was, in fact, a practicing attorney for approximately 10 years in North Carolina. He also earned a Master of Divinity and a Doctorate of Ministry from Andersonville Theological Seminary in Camilla, Georgia. And he served as Deputy Director of Wake Opportunities Incorporated in Raleigh, North Carolina. And presently, Dr. Smith serves on the Executive Committee of the International Ministerial Alliance of Durham and Vicinity and the Triangle Steering Committee for HBCUs. He is the retired pastor of Mount Calvary Baptist Church, and he is an inspirational and motivational speaker if you're looking for someone to come speak to your group. And he's the author of 3 published books that include Deal by Me, A Golden Opportunity Blown, as well as Come, Let Us Reason Together. I'm excited to introduce you to Dr. Smith.
Well, thank you for having me on your podcast. It's an honor and a privilege, and I'm excited to share with you tonight. I want you to know how much I do appreciate it.
One of the things about James is that he has a unique story. And I know when I introduced him, I said that he is both a doctor of ministry as well as a lawyer. I'm going to let you hear him tell you a little bit about his story, because I know I have a standard kind of guest, and you think, what about some of the guests that messed up? Like, we want to hear a little bit. Well, this gentleman is amazing. He achieved great success, had a setback, and then rebounded back again to great success. And so I can't wait for you to hear him. And so, James, I want you to tell our listeners a little bit about how you got into law and ministry, and tell us a little bit about that setback.
Grew up in the country, a little place called Moulton, North Carolina. The little village that we lived in was so small, and I have a little saying that when you enter it, you are leaving it. So that's just how small it was. But we enjoyed ourselves. I had lots of cousins. My grandfather was very fortunate. We owned about 500 acres of land. I was the oldest grandchild, and I stayed with aunts. My mom left to go to New York to work to make money to send me to school. When I got in college, I determined that I wanted to go to law school. I came back to my hometown. I was the first African-American lawyer to practice in my hometown. And at the time, I was the youngest African-American lawyer to practice in the state of North Carolina. So, my head was a little big. You can understand that. I eventually brought in a partner who was now just retired from being a district court judge. We're still good friends. And I eventually brought in another gentleman who also stepped down from the bench. But during my law practice, I started gambling. And of course, during this period, lost my focus. I lost my first wife, 5 years as a result of my gambling. I lost properties that I've accumulated. And I did something really stupid, just outright crazy. I left home one morning and went to the office and thought seriously about committing suicide. It was just like I had gone down to the bottom. But I think thinking about my mom, who had come down to live with me at the time because my wife and I had separated, I left the office and just started writing, thinking about suicide again, stopping in front of a big transfer truck. But, none of that I carried out. There was thoughts in my mind, though. But I stopped at a restaurant in Oxford, which is about 10, maybe miles from Henderson, where I was practicing law. And while I was sitting there eating, I looked out of the window and there was the CCB Bank, which is the Carolina Central Bank or something. The name was changed now to SunTrust. But anyway, then my mind just started racing. I started saying, whoa, boy, if I could just get my hands on $50,000, $100,000, I could go back to the office, pay off all my bills, and I could just sit back like it was, nothing happened. Crazy and stupid, I know, now as I think back over it, but that's where my mind was then. That's what I did. I did it, came out, and it's very interesting. I tell this story, and everybody laughed when I was doing CLE. When I came out, I got stopped actually twice.
Get out of here.
And because I was so well known, both of them let me go. It just came to me that, gee, they know who I am, what I've done. I'm just going to go ahead on and turn myself in. So I went straight to my former law partner's office. And, we had separated by that time because my gambling had just gotten to me. But I went straight to his law office, told the secretary what had happened. Nobody believed it. He happened to have been in D.C. at the time. So we called another friend of ours who practiced law over, and he came straight up to the office. And by that time, another friend of mine came over and examined me, who was a doctor. And then a swarm of law enforcement officers came into the yard of the office, asked was I there, and my lawyer friend said I was, and that I was prepared to turn myself in. They allowed him to take me back over to Oxford, and it was processed, put me on a $100,000 bond. I stayed in jail that night, and the next day they took me to an adjoining city to have a hearing on whether or not I was mentally competent to stand trial. Now, you can understand what had happened. I was a standing lawyer. Something had to be wrong. So they ordered that I go to Dorothy Dix Mental Hospital for 6 weeks observation. I stayed there 3 weeks. And during that 3 weeks, I just began to think of how I had thrown my life away, what had happened, how could I have got myself in this case. My faith kind of really took over. My mom was very committed Christian. And I know people were praying for me. And I was always in church. I was just this guy who got into gambling, but my faith took over. And I just started making my mind up that, look, I've just messed up. I know I shouldn't have done what I did. I'm going to go ahead and plead guilty. I'm going to get all this behind me. And I just said, gambling is over. All the other little vices I have is over. I called my lawyer and told him I was ready to get out of there. They called the judge, and everything happened for me because I knew everybody. I knew the judge my hometown, so, all this. And they reduced my bond to $10,000. And when I got out, they had a big feast, ready to party a little bit because I had gotten out and wanted to wish me well. And they had drinks and stuff, because that's what we were doing. And the secretary bought me a glass of scotch. And I just told her, nope, no more. But that's just where I was feeling, no more.
When you served those 3 weeks to determine your competence, what sentence did you get?
I got out, that was about from August until January. During this period of time, I accepted my call to the ministry. I preached my initial sermon on the night before I was to go to a court on that Monday. That Monday, the first Monday in January of 1982, and that's when I pleaded guilty. I preached my initial sermon that Sunday just before going to court on that Monday. And when I went to court, I pleaded guilty. and I got a 15-year sentence. At that time, if you served 5 years, a third of your time, no infractions. And I got out, served 4 years in Ashland, Kentucky. And then I spent 1 year in Petersburg in the camp. Then I was released.
Yeah. And one of the things you pointed out in the beginning of our conversation was at the time you were the youngest. And let me make sure I understood. Were the youngest African American in the state or the youngest in the state?
The youngest African American in the state.
Okay. So I can imagine, and I'm just going to use our, the way we would say it right now. Like if I were you, like my head would be swollen.
Well, I don't put it like that way, but as I had somebody say, I thought I was all that in a bag of chips.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you think that expectation of, rather the way that you related to yourself, do you think that contributed to getting into gambling?
Yeah, it probably did. I thought I could say I was young, and the people who I was gambling with were much older than I was. And I just thought I could hang out with them, playing poker. We were poker players. And they were playing poker. And I just felt that, look, I can hang right out here with these guys. I was doing well. I was making good money. I've come home with thousands of dollars, but then I'll also come home losing thousands of dollars. But I knew at one point, how to hold, the old word said when to fold. So I knew how to do that, and I was doing it. But at some point, and I can't tell you when that point happened, that the love of the game became more powerful than my being able to get up when I should. I just loved it. I was just staying there, playing it. And then you had other lawyers and professional guys, bondsmen and what have you, who contribute some to it, because if you got broke, you always knew that you could borrow another $500. If you needed $1,000, they'll let you have it because they know that the next week you're going to come and give it back to them. And so that contributed a little bit to it, because I didn't have to get up. If I had just gotten broke and didn't have any more money, I would have gotten on up. But I think that had a lot to do with it. Yeah.
I appreciate you saying that. It allows you to not confront the actual loss that What is a favorite song or movie, either now or all time?
Well, now my favorite song is, that is my favorite song. Prior to this, when I was into my world, My Girl, The Temptations. Yeah, that is my favorite song. I think that those two would be it. One, during my life now, during my 32 years, I should say, ministry, it would be probably My God Is Real. And prior to that time, I liked, when I was in college, I never forget when Temptations came up with My Girl. It just tore me up, So
that's a good one. I love that song.
Yeah.
And I also appreciate the way that you delineate the two periods of your life by your ministry and sobriety. And
Thank you.
I get that. What is a favorite moment from your childhood?
This is funny. My favorite, I don't like to put this as a favorite moment, but it's a moment that I remember most. That was when I was in first grade. I went to first grade in New York. I was up at the bat playing baseball or softball, whatever it was. It's been so many years ago. And somebody sneaked in behind me and put a firecracker in my pocket. And I had people laughing. I said, blew all of my pocket off and part of my other pocket.
Whoa.
And I went into the hospital, and I have that scar still now. So that's something I'll always remember. But my favorite memory as a child, I always spent the summers in New York, most of the summers with my mom. Went to the World Fair. That was a favorite memory. When I was in New York, out at where they played the U.S. tennis at now.
What was it about that?
I just think it was just so different. I hadn't seen anything like it. It was everything you could possibly think of. Looks like you saw it. It just to say I was out there,
Yeah.
at the World Fair in New York. I guess that might have been one of my favorite moments.
Perfect. And now this question I love to ask, especially someone like yourself. You've got so many accomplishments, like a world of accomplishments. Of all of them, I want to know about two. The first one is the one that means the most to you personally, James. And then the second would be the one that when others hear it, it's the one that most likely gets the, oh, or wow. So let's start with that first.
Ooh.
Which accomplishment is the one that means the most to you personally?
I would say my last 32 years of pastoring. I would say that's meant the most to me. I've truly enjoyed it because I've been very honest with my congregation. They know what I went through, and I think that they knew that I was genuine, and we got along well. We accomplished quite a bit. Not a real big congregation, but I had probably on an average of 100 members in attendance on Sunday, probably 200 on the road, this type thing. But it was a great pastorate. So I would think that was one that I'm most proud of. Now, before that time, obviously, I thought I was some kind of lawyer, so that's before, my transformation.
What about the accomplishment that when others hear it, it gets the, oh, okay.
Well, I think when I tell people that the bar allowed me to do continuing legal education after I had been disbarred and based upon the crime that I committed, they seem to be a little stalled in, like, you mean tell me that the bar let you do that? And I say, yeah. So that's one of them, I think, that happens. And to be honest with you, there are some who, when I first was called to my pastorate, had a hard time believing that I got called as a pastor based upon what I had gone through. A pastor calling somebody who has robbed a bank. That's I'm in church calling somebody who's robbed a bank. That's strange. So those are some things that I could kind of see and feel and know that did happen, but didn't bother me. I knew who I was.
I have to tell you that if somebody I knew said, and this is not now that you've had 30 something years as a minister, but let's say those first couple years, they said, oh yeah, he was a lawyer, which we know that all the jokes you make about lawyers, right? And he served time for robbing a bank. And now he's a pastor. I'd be like, don't tithe. But that, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah, sure. I understand.
Right?
I definitely understand.
And so I do get that people would be like, wait a minute, are you for real? But then here's the part that I really find fascinating, the first one that you pointed out, which is, I think enough people will get this, but for some who don't realize, like the Bar Association, they're serious about their ethics. They are serious about who can represent that profession because of all the jokes, because of all that can go wrong, right? And so for them to see your application to teach continuing legal education, it says so much about the evidence of your transformation. It says so much about what your character is that they would do that. And I also, as I'm saying this out loud to you, I'm appreciating that the same day that you took that action, you were ready to turn yourself in. And so I can see why, if I were someone on a bar association and I saw your story, I would be like, okay, yeah, okay, so he messed up. Because
I'm not so sure if the bar saw it that way at first.
Oh, okay. How long did it take you?
Well, it didn't take me that long because I hesitated. I had a friend, I think I may have told you this earlier, but I had a friend who shared with me about one of the other guys who was a white gentleman who charged with embezzling money, and they allowed him to teach ethics, mental health, and substance abuse. And he was the only one before me who was disbarred, who had served some time. And I could think I could do it because black crime was what you consider a violent crime. His was not. And so I just knew I couldn't do it. But he told me, he said, I read your book, and y'all got, your story is interesting. So when I talked to my wife about it, my present wife, now of 33 years, as a matter of fact, in July, she said to me, well, honey, you don't have your license anyway, so what you have to lose? So that's when I decided to do my application to do it. And so I did it. But they told me that I would hear something from them within about 2 weeks passed by, and I hadn't heard anything. So in my mind, I'm thinking that they are still processing this lawyer who robbed the bank. Only thing they saw was a lawyer, this guy who robbed the bank, and they couldn't picture anything else. So what I did on that Friday, which was the last day of that 2 weeks, I got dressed, put on my 3-piece suit. I had my tie on. I mean, the word said I was togged down. I like to dress anyway. I was togged down. And I went over to the bar, to the North Carolina State Bar. And the lady came down to meet me. And I could tell the expression on her face changed when she saw me. All she could visualize was somebody robbing the bank. But when she saw me, her expression changed. And she said, Mr. Smith, I promise you, you'll hear something from us within the next 2 or 3 days. Sure enough, I did. And the results was that we're pleased to let you know that you have been approved as a sponsor of continuing legal education, ethics, mental health, and substance abuse. And that's how it went,
Okay. That's awesome. That's great. And I always love when brothers share the extra that they did. Not that it's always about having to do extra, because I don't want to perpetuate you got to be twice as, this and that.
Yeah.
But it does make a difference sometimes, so I appreciate you sharing the extra initiative you took. That is not a common story. Let's talk about words. What is a favorite quote, saying, metaphor, or book?
I've heard it said so many times, good things come to those who wait. The darkest hour was just before dawn. A rolling stone gathers no moss. I heard that from my granddaddy, my mom, and all those things. So those are some of my favorite quotes,
Yeah. Oh.
And I guess here lately, the best 2 books I've read, I don't know whether you want to put this in, you might want to edit this, but I read 2 of the books. I read Michael Cohen's book, and I read Denise's book, Mary Trump's book. And I just enjoy reading those books because.
I know. I'm leaving it.
Okay.
Tell us why. This is not a one perspective show. So
okay.
tell us
I enjoy reading it because I can identify with Michael Cohen.
In what way?
Because he had served time. Then he wrote a book, and I could feel it. I could feel his honesty and where he had come, trying to make things right. That's a good thing to do. A lot of people don't particularly want to do that, but I can feel that in him. And he just spilled the beans. He just told it all. And it took a lot to do that. And that was my favorite book. I enjoyed the one by his niece, Mary Trump, mainly because, she knew him, obviously, and she knew her uncle. And they were just good books. I just enjoy reading them.
And I appreciate you saying that, because I don't read a lot of biographical or even, stuff by celebrities per se. But that's good to know, because I might be inclined to pick it up and check it out. And a listener might. Let's talk about some other experiences. What is a moment, conversation, or event that either changed the trajectory of your life or had a significant impact on your life?
Well, I think becoming the first African-American lawyer in my hometown and the youngest in the state of North Carolina at that time, I think that made me feel great. And I felt good having accomplished that. The next thing was my call to the ministry, because, there was a feeling that would never happen. When I applied to go to seminary, I applied to go to Southeastern Theological Seminary. they denied my application. And one of the things I tell people, I said, can you believe that a seminary would deny your application, based upon your background? But I didn't let it bother me. And I knew why they did it. They were probably was seeing if I was really serious about attending seminary. And the next semester, I applied again. And that semester, they accepted me. I stayed at Southeastern off and on until my last semester of my time to graduate. And they got another president in. And this president was relatively very conservative. I didn't like him, and it just wasn't going well for me. I got married and I was commuting to school. So I just decided that I was going to transfer all of my credits to Andersonville Theological Seminary. And that's how I finished at Andersonville. But that moment when I got the notification from the church that I pastored that I had been selected as their pastor, that was really an interesting moment because it was like, wow, yeah.
I can imagine, and you can correct me, that would feel like a culmination, a return to grace, so to speak.
Oh, yeah, sure, no question. I agree with that.
I want to go back to being the first African-American to practice law in your area, in your town, your hometown. What kind of law did you practice? And, I know you'll be speaking for yourself and not your clients, but what do you think it provided to your community to have their first African-American attorney?
Oh, they were excited. They were excited. I was well known in our district. We had 5 counties. And in 1976, I was so well known that I ran for district court judge in 1976. And if the law had been like it is now, I would have been elected the first African-American district court judge in North Carolina, because we just didn't have them, I'm sorry. We did have one other one. His name was Johnson. So,
Okay.
But it would have been so few. So I was well known. I got 47% of the vote, but because we had to have a runoff, you had to get 50%, and that's when I lost. But I was well known all over.
And what kind of law did you?
I practiced, back in the 70s was not like it is now. And especially in a small town, the practice now is more specialized. But back in the 70s, we call ourselves doing general law practice. So I did wills, I did title examinations, I represented somebody with a rape case, I represent somebody with a speed ticket. That was the law practice. So we consider ourselves general trial practitioners.
Yes. And, I would imagine that might also still be true in smaller communities.
They may have one, maybe or two ones that they feel has gotten that name of being that criminal lawyer in town. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But by and large, they are still very much a general trial practitioner. It hasn't changed that much.
Let me ask you about a moment or event that either signifies or highlights your experience as a Black man in the United States.
Ooh. Now, obviously, Obama was a really touching moment. You never expected at that time a Black to be elected as president of the United States. So, yeah, that was a real touching moment. And then another touching moment, because even from the time that I ran for district court judge back in 1976, they had not had a district court judge in the district, African-American one, since that time. And of course, when my friend who was one of the lawyers represented me was in the North Carolina State Assembly, he had a chance to recommend my former law partner, and he became the first district court judge. And I went to that ceremony. So that was a real special moment for me, because I was able to see my former law partner finally become that first judge. I had been the first one to run, but then he became the first judge. And so that was a touching moment. And probably a whole lot of other touching moments in my life. I just, I've been around so long now. It's been so much that I've done and I've seen. But those are two I can remember.
Yeah, I get that. When you say that, this is completely off topic, but slightly related. The students that I teach now, I teach high school, their birthdays are like 2007, 2008. And it is so weird that they were born so far after 9/11, And it's funny how the longer you live, the things that happened earlier, you think, like I remember the 92 riots in Los Angeles, and it was like, oh my gosh, this is just crazy. And then you live a bit longer, and then you see a little more crazy, and then you live a little bit longer, you see a little more crazy. Next thing you know, you're watching an insurrection at the Capitol, and who knows what'll happen in the next 20 or 30 years.
Hey, look, and I should have, and I could have easily said that. Now that was wow. I was watching that on TV. I mean, that was just outright. Crazy.
That gets that emoji where your mind is blown.
Oh boy, that was my former partner and my best friend. Both of them in Henderson, North Carolina. We were back on the phone, just calling each other and texting each other. That was amazing. I said, they're going in now. They're going in now. And I said, what? Then they get back to it. It was yeah.
That was a crazy time.
Oh yeah, crazy time.
So funny how the longer you live, the things that you're like, oh man, no, that one, and then there's always one that's something.
Yeah.
James, what has your experience been with law enforcement?
I'm gonna tell you, like I tell people when I do some of my seminars and we're talking, and I've gone in, I've had people do my books as a book review, and I've gone in and they've asked me questions, and I tell them, because I practice law, I saw some situations that I know were just as bad as some of the situations that happen now. But we didn't have these cameras, and it was impossible for me to prove those situations. I've had clients that come to tell me this and that, and I say, how can we prove it? We got to prove. She said, no, but that happened, lawyer, So I know that happens. But even in my situation, I tell people that this happened to me, and I know that had I been somebody else other than a lawyer, that I wouldn't have been treated the way I was treated. And I tell them that all the time, So I got some pretty special treatments, mainly because of who I was and who I knew. Yeah. But most African Americans, especially young folk, have not been in that position, and they don't get that kind of treatment. And being a person who had practiced law, I recognize that. I make certain I share that. But I've had some, reactions with law enforcement. Obviously, when I robbing the bank, that gave me some reaction with law enforcement. You should see my Department of Motor Vehicle record before my life change, as opposed to after my life change. Before my life change, I lost license, I lost everything, speeding, doing this and doing that. I had to go to class. But after my life change, I think I've gotten, since 1986 up until now, I've only been stopped 3 times for speeding tickets. And they were actually speeding in a 35 miles speed zone. I might have been going 50, but got to slow down, this type of stuff. That's all I've had. But before that time, now before 86, I'd be going down the road. It might stop me anytime. But you know what happened?
What?
They either tell me, look, lawyer, you just better slow down. Or if they gave me a ticket, I went straight to the judge, and it was dismissed. You didn't see it. You follow what I'm trying to say?
I do.
that's what happened there. But that was because of who I knew, and I was this lawyer, in the community. So,
race is an undercurrent of bias in so many institutions. That is true. But we also could have a conversation about class.
Oh, sure. No question.
What I see. So one of the new words they have now is intersectionality, right? And so, you're Black and you're male, but you're a Black male, well-known lawyer, successful. That's a different experience. Just like Denzel is not having the same experience as my young cousin who's, surfing jobs. He's not having Denzel's experience, and Denzel is not having his.
I agree with you. You understand exactly what I'm saying.
I do. I have a friend who gets on me because I teach economics. And so I am about empowering people in the material realm. And he's like, there's more to it. And I'm like, yeah, there is more to it. But in real talk, your level of material world success impacts your treatment on a day-to-day basis.
I'll tell you something else. I was telling you about those couple of tickets. I think it was 3 tickets. Of all those 3 tickets, I may have gone to court, but if I went to court, I tell you, I had 2 former partners who was on the bench, and with 5 districts, I would try to work it out where I knew they were going to be in court, and I went to court, and my case was dismissed. I haven't pleaded guilty to anything, So that's you understand where I'm coming from.
I even like the way your voice said it, the way you went to anything.
I mean, it. My wife laughed at me, and now we travel sometimes. She said, "Okay, your friends are retired now. They're not on the bench anymore." So I said, "Okay, I better slow down." But that's what happens. That's what happens.
Yeah, I appreciate us having this conversation, putting it out in the public. If the United States was a woman, Dr. Smith, what would you say to her?
I think I would just say a few words. And that would be, tell her, don't treat us like we've treated you.
All right. Say more, please.
Don't treat us men. I'm not saying Black or white. I'm just saying men like we have treated you, women. Because I think the men in power don't respect women enough and don't give them the proper attention that we would give ourselves. And my wife and I have this discussion quite a bit. And she will say, we're talking about the abortion issue. And I'm a minister, and obviously, I value life, but I also don't like hypocrisy. I think that if you're going to value life, then value life. Don't value life in one instance, and then have guns all on the street and take them away in another instance. Okay, so my position is that you ought to allow females to have their rights just like you would want your rights. Let me give you an example. What would you think would happen to the country if women were in charge and the majority of them said, we want to make certain that all men are sterile from here on out. You follow where I'm coming from. That's the kind of thing that kind of bothers me.
Yeah.
So that's why I would say, if the United States was a woman.
I love your answer. For whatever reason, I swear the word intersectionality is not one that comes out of my mouth all the time, but I'm just so present to it in this conversation because I appreciate your male perspective on the treatment of women, because we don't really hear. It's almost like women, we are leading the charge on our rights. And I don't know that we even allow men to take center stage to fight for us, because that is in some sense demeaning, and we want to be at the lead, which I get. But it is, I think, at least for myself, valuable to hear a man's perspective on that and an acknowledgement of it. I appreciate you bringing that up too, because I remember when the day that it was announced that Roe v. Wade was overturned, I too thought about the Second Amendment and how boys can have free access to their toys, which I was referring to as guns, but girls can't have control over their bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought that doesn't seem fair. That doesn't seem right.
I agree.
Yeah. So anyway, I appreciate you bringing up Second Amendment and all that. And I especially like the way that you said, if you're going to value life, value life. Mm-hmm. And I'm even going to go so far, it's your interview, but I'm going to interject my little opinion. I remember sharing with some of the folks who were really excited that Roe v. Wade was overturned, that I got no problem with banning abortion if we're going to set up the right kind of care for all these kids. We're going to guarantee them top-notch health care, no matter what happens or how they come out. We are also going to make sure and enforce a colorblind adoption system so that we do not have kids of color left in foster care and in orphanages. And if we're going to do all that, then I say, let every child be born. Let every child be born.
We're on the same page.
Yeah.
Exactly the way I see it. Yeah. I just don't like the hypocrisy.
Exactly.
I hear it. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. Yep. Right there with you. And I know this question can be hard because I'm asking for a moment that exemplifies love. And I especially think about you being a pastor, being married. Like, I know that there is love all through and through your life. But what is just a moment that exemplifies what love is to you?
I had come out of prison, and my present wife was married to a minister. Mm-hmm. And I went to talk with him just about my life, trying to get back on track and some things that I needed to do, because he was moderator of the United Shallow Association. And I wanted to get catechized, so I wanted to make certain that I did everything right. So I talked with him. And I didn't realize that maybe 2 years following that he would be preaching in his church, and went home and had a heart attack. Mm-hmm. Left 2 children. One was 12, and the other one was 7. Mm-hmm. And of course, his wife, and I was working with a law office over in a hometown that they were living. And so I just asked one of the girls in our office about her. And because I had, my background was, then I was ex-con. I had just got out of prison. Mm-hmm. So I said, you think I could get an opportunity to talk with her? And what would I say to her? Because before that time, I could have considered myself a playboy. I knew I was okay. I talked to any girls I wanted to. But now I'm an ex-con. I'm kind of feeling a little different about myself. And so she said, she called me Smitty. She said, well, Smitty, talk to her just like you talk to anybody else, And so I got up nerve to send her a carnation roses or something to the fact. I left a little note in, and I say, this is an admirer of yours. If you want to know more about who it is, call. And this was a friend of hers who worked in the office that I was talking to. So call her. Mm-hmm. So I sent it to the school that she was teaching. And sure enough, she wanted to know who it was. And so she came by the office, and the secretary said, there he is over in the office. And so from then on, we started talking. And about 6 months after we had started talking, we were married. That was the And we've had the best marriage you want to see. 2 kids, both of them are grown, and they're doing well. And that was my moment. I guess because it hit me, it was something that I thought it would happen, but I just wasn't sure, who was going to really be confident and want to marry an ex-con. These type of things were going through my mind. What kind of wife, but it has been fantastic.
Congratulations on
thank you.
creating a successful marriage, because that's just hard, whatever you've gone through. So before I go into the next question, James, you've got a lot of life experience.
Mm-hmm.
What is something that you wish more people knew, but don't, either from your professional life or your life experiences?
I wish that more people would truly get to know me and learn more about me, because I still think there are a lot of people who only know me as the lawyer and the bank robber, but maybe don't know me who I am now. I talked about it, I think, in my last chapter, something about what do I want people to know about me?
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of talked about that I know most folks will remember the lawyer and remember the bank robbery, but you never want that to be the last thing that they can say about you. And so I've tried to live my life where that won't be the last thing that they can say about me. Now they would have to say that for over 35 or 40 years, he has lived a Christian life, a decent life, and he is not the person that he used to be.
Yeah. That's the last chapter of which of your books?
I think it's hold on one moment. I think I might be.
See, this is when an author has so many books. They're like, well, hold on, let me check. That's a good place to be.
It's probably in the last parts where I just give my little tidbits.
Yes.
I wish people to know. My last book is about things I learned from my experiences,
Mm-hmm.
And I talk about, you hear me mention this about, the darkest hour just before dawn. And obviously you can understand why I would mention that, because I was in a dark moment, but then,
Mm-hmm.
I hung in there and and I talk about how you have to confront the source. And I did that, And because I was into gambling, that is one chapter that I talked about is if something is consuming you, then step back from it. And there are some other things that I talked about. And then one of the main things that I dealt with here is that the title of my book is entitled Self-Evaluation. I talked about the time that I called a gambling anonymous organization because I wanted to go speak to the guys because I knew I had been gambling. And the manager asked me if I still was a gambler. He said, "Are you still a compulsive gambler?" I said, "No, I don't gamble at all now. Finish." And he said, "Well, I'm not sure if the women would appreciate you coming in, talking with them." So I said, "Why?" Because I thought I had a lot to say to him. He said to me, "Well, we just believe that once a gambler, always a gambler. If you're just like an alcoholic, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic." I came to the conclusion that I may not have been a compulsive gambler. I came to the conclusion that I may have been afraid to fail. Okay, it doesn't make any sense to you.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had been on this pedestal. I'd been this lawyer, well known in this 5-district area. I was known as a very good lawyer in the area. And I think when I was going down in my gambling and losing money and lost everything that I had, that I was afraid to get there, and I thought I could recoup. And that's why I robbed the bank. That's the conclusion that I eventually came to, because I knew I I didn't fall in the category of being once a gambler, always a gambler. I knew that was not the case. So
Yeah.
I came to that conclusion. And so those are the type of things I talk about in the book. Very good book. I've gotten very good reviews on it. And not only do I do that, I do workshops. I do inspirational speaking. People call me all the time. If somebody wants me to come out to California, don't mind coming out. As a matter of fact, just tell them, please call me. I love to come and share. But that's basically it. And I'm now a podcaster, so I do at least 2 to 3 podcasts a week.
Okay.
And my podcast is entitled Deal by Me, but we ask people to tell us your story. We are encouraging, inspiring, and transforming. So if anybody wants to listen to some of my podcasts, just pull up Deal by Me podcast. And my website is dealbyme.com.
Perfect. And of course, listeners, I will have links in the show notes. So if you didn't get it all written down, don't worry. When you get where you're going, if you're driving, you can just go into the show notes and find links there. Well, the absolute last question that I ask brothers is, now that we have had this conversation, you and I, what did you get for yourself, James, out of having this conversation?
Well, you gave me a chance to reflect more, but just talking to you, you brought out questions to me that have made me think. And some of those questions have been very interesting, especially one about if the United States was a woman. I'd never had that question asked. And you asked some really interesting questions. I really admire you. So I want to just say to your audience, listen to her podcast, because she asked those piercing questions that make you think. So thank you so much.
I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, I'm always left with an impression of each brother. And there's just one word that comes up for me, and it's just renewed. Everything about you is renewed, renewal. And I just appreciate that spirit is in the world, and that everyone who interacts with you sees that for themselves, renewal is a possibility. Renewal is a possibility. So I thank you for being the spirit of that in the world.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to 365 Brothers. Certainly hope you enjoyed the episode. I encourage you to subscribe. Please leave a review. I want to know what you think. Also, if you know someone who would be a fantastic guest for 365 Brothers, please direct them to our website, 365brothers.com. You'll also find all the episodes there, 365brothers.com. And your support is welcome. And remember, to listen is to love.